Andrew was never late. That was the first thing that felt off. You know how certain people just exist with this kind of rhythm, this exactness, like the world ticks a little straighter around them? That was Andrew. Three-piece suit, navy, tie never crooked, the kind of man who typed his passwords in with the precision of a metronome. But that morning, the door to the bank opened 8 minutes past the hour. No apology, no glance. Just the cold sound of his footsteps crossing the hall. Marble tiles, too slow, too heavy, like he was carrying something no one else could see. And right away something in you felt it, like watching a live feed of a classified file slowly unspooling, pixel by pixel, and knowing you should look away. But you don't. You can't. He didn't see me. I was sitting 2 desks away behind, the frosted glass divider flipping through stale paperwork, but my eyes tracked him like prey. I couldn't explain it at the time, but something was already wrong with the room. The light through the windows had a bruised yellow tint, like an old photograph curling at the edges. And then he did it. He denied the man's check. Without hesitation, without question. Just slid it back across the desk like it was nothing. The man was calm. Too calm. Dressed sharp, real sharp. Tailored charcoal suit, silver tie clip that caught the dying morning light just so. His nameplate said, Maurice, but he never said it aloud. He didn't need to. When Andrew told him the check was suspicious, Maurice only tilted his head the way you do when someone forgets your name in a room you built with your own hands. And then, this is the part no one can explain. Maurice leaned in and whispered something. I didn't hear the words. No one did. No one but Andrew. But I saw his face change, his shoulders sank like gravity had just doubled, and his eyes, they stopped moving. They didn't blink. Not once. I remember because I counted. 8 minutes. No blink. Just that same frozen stare toward the office door Maurice had walked through, and disappeared. Not out the front. Not to the side. Not through any exit anyone could trace. He vanished. And the silence that followed was like the entire building was holding its breath. The air had weight. I remember my ears ringing even though no sound had been made. Later that day, Andrew began searching the employee records. Not for Maurice, but for himself. I saw it on his monitor, his name typed into the search bar again and again and again, but nothing came up. No profile, no file, no trace. And then, something even stranger. His reflection in the glass behind his desk started lagging. A half-second behind, like it was deciding whether or not to keep pretending. The next morning his office was empty, not just cleared out. Gone. The space where his office had been was now a break room, complete with a vending machine and a table that looked like it had been there for years. No one remembered him, no one but me, and even I started to forget the shape of his face. Until last night when my daughter, barely learning to talk, pointed to our muted television screen, an old news story about a bank acquisition, and said a name we've never spoken in our home. Maurice. She said it again, slower, like she was tasting it. Then she looked at me and asked, why did he take Daddy's voice? And the screen, frozen on the face of a CEO they claimed had owned the bank for decades, glitched for just a second, just long enough for me to see something. Impossible behind his smile, so here we are. You and me. And I need you to tell me something I can't ask anyone else. Do you remember who hired you? The question hung there, heavy and sharp, slicing through the silence like a blade you didn't know was there until it drew blood. Do you remember who hired you? It felt less like a question, and more like a key turning in a lock that had been rusted shut for far too long. And that's when everything started to unravel. Or maybe it was unspooling all along, and I was only just beginning to see the frayed edges. I sat back in my chair, heart thudding loud enough to drown out the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The office around me felt thinner somehow, as if the walls were breathing, pulsing just beyond the edge of vision. I tried to steady my breath, but it caught in my throat, sharp and uneven, like I'd swallowed a shard of glass coated in ice. I ran my fingers over the smooth edge of the desk, But even that felt unreal, as if my skin was touching something synthetic, something designed to fool me. I tried to tell myself it was stress, the kind of stress that clings when the world you thought was solid cracks beneath your feet. But then I heard it, the first crack in the soundtrack of this nightmare. A faint audio glitch. At first, I thought it was coming from the old speaker system, but then the voice echoed back at me. My own voice, distorted and stretched, whispering something I couldn't quite catch. I leaned closer, heart hammering, trying to catch the words, but they slipped just beyond comprehension, like a secret being erased as fast as it was told. That's when the memories began to dissolve. I'd been so sure about Andrew, about Maurice, about the vanishing and the whisper no one else heard. But now the edges of those moments blurred. There were gaps, blank spaces where my mind refused to tread, like a room I'd locked myself out of. I started finding things I never remembered taking, a set of keys I didn't recognize, a voice recording buried deep in my phone labeled only as unknown. When I played it, there was nothing but static. But if you listened closely, there was a whisper beneath, it barely audible. Not Maurice, not Andrew, something else, something older. Something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I tried to tell someone, anyone. That's when Tom showed up. Tom is a friend, or at least he used to be. He's the kind of guy who smiles a little too easily and knows exactly what to say to make you doubt your own doubts. He listened to my story over stale coffee in a dim diner booth, fingers tapping nervously on the formica table. But the more I spoke, the more I noticed something odd. He didn't seem to really hear me. His eyes flicked away like he was looking past me, scanning the shadows lurking just out of reach. When he finally spoke, his voice was too calm, too practiced. He suggested I was maybe just overwhelmed, maybe losing grip on what's real. And when I pressed him on Maurice, on Andrew, on the vanishing, he gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes, then changed the subject like he'd rehearsed it 1,000 times before. The thing about Tom is, you want to trust him, you need. But every word he says adds a layer of doubt, a subtle hint that maybe I'm the one who's fractured. After he left, I found a note slipped under my door. No signature. Just one sentence scrawled in shaky handwriting. Some truths are buried because they're too dangerous to remember. That's when the real fear took root, not of ghosts or vanishing men, but of what my own mind might be hiding from me. Went back to the bank that night, hoping to find some clue. Instead, the building was locked tight, shutters drawn like the place had been sealed off for years. But through a crack in the window, I saw it, screens flickering with faces I didn't recognize, yet somehow felt like distant reflections of my own. I pressed my ear to the glass and caught fragments of conversation, voices talking about the experiment, the test subject, and a name I hadn't heard before. Elias. Elias. A name I couldn't place, yet it settled in my chest like a stone. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You're closer than you think, but closer is dangerous. And then the screen went black. I'm not sure what to believe anymore. Was Andrew ever really gone? Or was he here, just out of sight, trapped behind some veil I couldn't pierce? Was Maurice a man, a ghost, or something else entirely? And what if Tom isn't the friend I thought he was, but a gatekeeper for secrets no one wants uncovered? The more I dig, the more I feel the walls closing in. My memories fracture under the weight of silence, and every familiar face hides a question I'm too afraid to ask aloud. This isn't just a story about a check declined or a man who vanished. It's about the truth behind what no one tells you, about the real unsolved mystery lurking beneath the surface of everything you think you know. And right now, as I sit here typing this, a single thought claws at me with terrible urgency. What if the thing I fear most isn't what I've lost, but what I never had to begin with? What if I'm the one who's missing? Because the last thing I heard before the power cut out was a voice whispering, not Maurice, not Andrew, but my own name. And it wasn't coming from my mouth. There was a moment, just a flicker, a fragile breath of certainty, when I thought I had it all figured out. The missing piece of the puzzle that would bring Andrew back from whatever vanishing act had swallowed him whole, and finally expose the truth behind Maurice, Tom, and the whispers that clawed at the edges of my sanity. It started with an old, leather-bound ledger I found tucked away in the back of a dusty storage room at the bank. I almost didn't open it, the cover cracked and stained like something that had been buried for decades, waiting for a hand brave enough, or foolish enough, to pry it loose from the darkness. But when I flipped the first page, my pulse hit a desperate rhythm. Names, dates, strange annotations, references to something called the custodians, a phrase that sent a shiver through my spine because it felt simultaneously foreign and intimately familiar, like a word my mind had buried beneath layers of forgetfulness. The ledger wasn't just a book. It was a map. It led me down a rabbit hole through old city records, faded newspaper clippings tucked between the pages, and photographs so blurred and worn I could barely make out faces. Yet those faces stirred something dormant in me, echoes of memories I couldn't fully grasp. One photo stood out, a black and white image of a man who looked hauntingly like Andrew, standing next to an imposing figure whose face was obscured by shadows. The caption read, "Robert Hensley, 1962, the man who vanished but never left." The name caught in my throat. That vanishing from the 60s mirrored what was happening now too perfectly to be coincidence. A man who disappeared, a whisper no one heard, a silence that swallowed everything whole. It was a puzzle repeating itself, a haunting imprint of something neither time nor memory could erase. Then came the breakthrough, a voice recording hidden within the ledger's pages, buried in the crackling static of a brittle cassette tape I found wedged in the back cover. I played it on an old tape player I'd borrowed from my grandmother's attic, and for a moment the room filled with the grainy voice of Robert Hensley himself. His words were fragmented, his tone weary but urgent, as if warning someone, or perhaps himself, not to trust what they saw or heard. "They watch," he whispered, the static swallowing the final syllables like it was afraid of the truth. It was a confession, a warning, an unraveling all at once. And in that moment I felt like I was standing on the edge of revelation, the hidden truth glowing just beyond my fingertips. But then, as the tape ended, I found it, the detail that shattered everything I thought I knew like a pane of glass cracking beneath the weight of a heavy hand. The ledger wasn't just old, it was a forgery. The dates were wrong, the names falsified, the photographs doctored to fit a narrative designed to mislead. It was a meticulously crafted trap, a memory glitch designed to make me believe I'd uncovered something real when in fact I was being led deeper into the maze. The realization was suffocating. I sat there, the ledger crumbling in my hands, heart sinking as the line between what was true and what was manufactured blurred until it vanished completely. It wasn't just the ledger. The whole thing. The vanished man, the whispers, Maurice, Tom, even my own fractured memories, felt like echoes of a past I was forced to relive without permission, a distorted reflection of trauma I couldn't fully access. I remembered flashes. Now, a childhood birthday party where the laughter suddenly stopped, and my mother's face drained of color as she whispered to someone only I could see. The way the shadows in my childhood home stretched too long, swallowing corners, hiding things I was never supposed to find. And beneath it all, the constant, unrelenting feeling of being watched, of something lurking just beyond the veil of perception, waiting patiently as if it had been present from the very beginning. I called Tom again, desperate for answers, but his voice was colder this time, almost rehearsed. He told me I was chasing ghosts, that some mysteries were best left buried. His words were a warning, but also a threat, and in the silence that followed, I could almost hear the weight of those unspoken threats pressing down on me, a reminder that the danger wasn't just in the vanishing or the whispers, it was in the very act of remembering, because the deeper I dug, the more I felt that presence tightening its grip, weaving itself into the very fabric of my thoughts, blurring the edges of reality and memory until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. That night, as I sat alone in the dark, the weight of everything pressing down on me, I found myself staring at the first video I ever recorded. The moment I first realized Andrew was missing. But something was wrong. The footage flickered, glitched, and rewound itself in a loop that revealed a detail I'd missed before. The reflection in the window behind Andrew wasn't mine. It was someone, or something else, watching, waiting, smiling, and just like that, the story I thought I was living unraveled completely. The faces, the names, the vanished men, and whispered warnings. They weren't separate pieces of a puzzle. They were layers of a carefully constructed illusion designed to keep me trapped in a cycle of forgetting and remembering, hoping and despairing. So maybe the real question isn't who hired me or who Maurice really was, or even what happened to Andrew. Maybe the question is this: who has been watching you all along, pulling the strings behind the scenes, and why haven't you noticed? Because if you thought you understood this story before, it's time to watch again. Watch every glance, every whisper, every shadow and silence, and listen for the things they don't want you to hear. Because the truth behind what no one tells you isn't a story, it's a trap. And the deeper you go, the harder it becomes to tell if you're running toward escape or just further into the darkness. They say you're never truly alone in a mystery like this. Not when the threads start weaving beyond your own fractured mind and stretch out into a web tangled with other unseen lives. For weeks, maybe months, I thought I was the only one caught in this spiraling void of vanished men, whispers, and half-remembered truths. But now I know it's not just me. There are others. People who, like me, have been silently watching, waiting, and feeling the invisible fingers of a force that refuses to let go. It's not just a story. It's a shared experience, a collective fever dream that only those who have touched the edges of this darkness can sense, like a secret language spoken in shadows and silence. It started with the messages. Cryptic, fragmented, almost indecipherable. Texts appearing on my phone at odd hours. No sender, just a string of numbers and symbols that felt like a code begging to be cracked. At first, I thought it was a prank or a glitch, but the symbols began to make sense, revealing coordinates, dates, even partial phrases that echoed my own thoughts. You were right all along. Find the file they buried, what the government never released. These weren't random strangers reaching out. These were others who had been touched by the same unseen hand, the same intangible threat. I realized suddenly that the invisible watchers had eyes everywhere, eyes that blinked in Morse code and danced in binary shadows. And then there were the dreams. Not mine alone, but shared. An eerie communion of fractured memories where faces blurred into one another, and the same cold, disembodied voice whispered warnings in a language that slipped just beyond comprehension. Each night, I woke gasping, clutching at these visions that felt like messages embedded deep within my subconscious, carefully planted to guide or to warn. The dreams spoke of places I'd never been and events I could barely recall, like a puzzle assembled from someone else's past. But when I looked closer, the details felt unsettlingly familiar. Symbols etched in forgotten places, patterns that lined the walls of my own childhood home, and a name I hadn't heard in years whispered on a wind that never existed. Amid this gathering storm of shared secrets and half-truths, a third voice emerged, one that didn't echo my doubts or feed my fears but cut straight through the haze like a scalpel. They called themselves the Observer, a ghost in the digital machine who appeared in the margins of forums, in the background of found footage from 20 years ago, in videos and audio clips that no one had seen before, fragments of a truth hidden from the public eye. The Observer's words were raw and unfiltered, painting a picture of manipulation and control so vast it made everything else seem small and trivial. They warned of a presence that wasn't bound by time or place, a force that watched not just from shadows, but from within the very fabric of memory and identity. "You're not crazy. They lied to you," the Observer wrote in one message that felt like a lifeline tossed in a stormy sea. Your mind is not a prison. It's a battleground. The real war is for what you remember and what you forget. The real enemy doesn't just erase people, it erases selves. And that's when the paranoia deepened into something darker. If this presence could manipulate memory, bend reality, even rewrite identity, then what did that say about me? About the people I thought I knew? I started seeing myself in reflections that weren't quite right, small glitches in my own behavior, moments where I couldn't recall conversations I was sure I'd had, flashes of places I'd never visited. The line between who I was and who I was made to be began to blur, dissolving like smoke in a stale room. The messages grew more urgent, their language fragmented but unmistakable. They watch. They know. You are the signal and the noise. And in the darkest hours when the world outside fell silent, I felt the weight of those words pressing down, heavy with unspoken threats and fractured truths. This isn't just my story anymore. It's a shared reality that few can glimpse and even fewer can understand. The watchers are always there, just beyond the edge of sight, threading together a narrative that erases the past and rewrites the future. The people like Andrew, like Maurice, like Tom, they're not anomalies. They're pieces in a much larger game, players in a script written by forces that refuse to reveal their names. As I sit here now, fingers trembling over the keyboard, a final message pulses on my screen. No sender, just a single line that burns into my mind with cold clarity. Watch again. Watch closely. The truth is in the spaces between, and maybe that's the real curse. Not knowing who to trust, not knowing what is real, and feeling the unsettling certainty that everything you thought was true might just be a shadow cast by something watching, waiting, not just for you, but for all of us. I never imagined the moment would come like this. Quiet, heavy, and crushing all at once, not with a bang, but with the slow, suffocating weight of something that's been building beneath the surface of my soul, unspoken and unbearable. The mystery has never really been about what happened to Andrew, or the vanished faces, or even the cryptic messages scattered across time like breadcrumbs for the lost. It's about why. Why this darkness chose me, or us. Why the pieces were shuffled into this labyrinth of silence and forgetfulness. Why it all feels so personal, like a mirror reflecting the parts of ourselves we bury deepest, the fears we don't dare name. I sit here now, the ledger and recordings strewn across the table, the glow of the screen casting long shadows that seem to move with a life of their own. The observer's words echo in my mind, not just as warnings but as a call. Your mind is a battleground, and I'm beginning to understand that the fight isn't out there, in some shadowy conspiracy, but within me, the fear, the doubt, the desperate hope to hold on to something real in a world designed to make us forget who we are. It's a terrifying thought. That memory, identity, the very essence of what makes us human, can be manipulated, stolen, rewritten. And yet, maybe that's the truth this whole nightmare has been trying to teach me. That beneath the surface of every vanished person, every whispered secret, is a fragile human soul desperate to be remembered, to be seen, even if that memory comes at the cost of everything else. The confession comes not from some outside force, but from within, a voice trembling with shame and regret, the rawest part of me stripped bare. I remember now. A fragment I'd hidden away so deep it was almost gone. A moment of silence in my childhood, when I looked away from someone who needed me. When fear won over courage. When I chose forgetting over facing the unbearable. Maybe that was the first, vanishing. Maybe the real disappearance was the loss of my own truth, buried beneath layers of denial and silence. And now, standing on this precipice, I'm faced with a choice that feels more like a sentence than a salvation. To confront the darkness fully, to unearth every buried secret no matter the cost, or to let it keep weaving its shadows in the corners of my mind, living half forgotten and half feared. To choose truth is to risk losing everything I thought I was. To choose silence is to live forever haunted, a ghost in my own life. But what scares me most isn't the danger of knowing. It's the terrifying possibility that this darkness isn't some external force at all. That it's the raw, unvarnished truth about what it means to be human. Fragile, broken, desperate for meaning in a world that offers none. That the vanishing, the whispers, the watchers, they are not enemies but reflections of our deepest fears and regrets, echoing across time because they are part of us. The room feels impossibly still as I stare at the empty chair across from me. Maurice's chair, Tom's, Andrew's, all the names that have become shadows in this story. I realize now that the real mystery isn't in finding them, but in finding myself beneath the rubble of memories, lies, and half-truths. And that this moment, this terrifying awakening, is less an end than a beginning. The first step into a truth so raw and unyielding it threatens to shatter me or set me free. The screen flickers, and in the dim light I hear the whisper again. Not from outside, but from within. Remember, forget, remember. And as the night folds over me, I understand that some truths don't just want to be found. They demand to be lived, even when they break you in two. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.